Hello class, this is lesson 6-3 about solving compound inequalities. A compound inequality is when you have two or more inequalities that are connected by the words and, or. So that would be a compound inequality. So if I was going to graph the inequality x is greater than -4, it would be an open circle at -4 pointing to the right. If I was going to graph x is less than or equal to 3, then it would have a filled in circle at 3 and pointing everything to the left. If I was going to combine these with the word and, I'm looking for just what do they have in common. And that's what we would graph all on one number line. So it would be the numbers between -4 and 3, where -4 would be an open circle, 3 would be a filled in circle, and I would write the inequality -4 is less than x is less than or equal to 3. Now let's do another one. If I had x is greater than or equal to 1, I would have a filled in circle on 1, and then I would shade everything that is pointing to the right. Likewise, if I was going to graph x is less than -2, I'd have an open circle at -2 and shade everything that is less than that going to the left. If I was going to turn this into an or statement, I would shade everything that I have going in the two different directions. So everything that is less than -2, but also everything that is greater than +1. And as you can see, there's a big gap in between those, and that's where the word or would be. So x is less than -2, or x is greater than or equal to +1. So now that we know what these look like, let's go ahead and solve these compound inequalities and then graph each one. The way that we're going to solve it is just like you would an equation, but we're going to perform operations to all sections or all sides. So for instance, I would add 2, not just to the middle, but to the left and to the right to get that h alone. So that leaves me with -6 is less than or equal to h is less than 3. And that's it for solving that compound inequality. So now we just need to graph it. So I think I'm going to count by 2's just for this number line. There we go. And I'll go ahead and fill in a circle at -6, and I'll have an open circle at +3, and I will shade everything in between. All right, for our next example, first we're going to subtract 2 on all three sides, or sections, I don't know what you want to call it. So -7 minus 2 is -9, and that's less than 3y, which is less than or equal to +3. And then I'm going to divide everything by +3, and that leaves me with -3 is less than y, which is less than or equal to +1. So this time, I think that I can just count by 1's probably. So I'll just do that in both directions. And I'm going to have an open circle at -3 and a filled in circle at +1. And again, I'm going to shade everything in between. All right, now for these next two examples, we have or compound inequalities. So we're going to solve them individually and then graph them on the same number line. So let's subtract 8 from both sides, and that leaves me with 4n is less than or equal to 8. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and I find that n is less than or equal to 2. For our second one, let's subtract 7 on both sides. We're left with -3n is less than -18, and then I can divide both sides by -3, and I find that n is greater than, because I need to flip it, +6. So this solution would be n is less than or equal to +2, or n is greater than +6. So I'm going to go ahead and just number some of the values on my number line, and I'm going to have a filled in circle at 2, and I'm going to shade everything that is going to the left. And then I have an open circle at 6 and shade everything greater than that going to the right. And I'm done. All right, for our next example, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1 on both sides. And then when I do that, I'm left with 5t is less than 10. And then I can divide both sides by 5, and I find that t is less than positive 2. For our second half, we're going to subtract 10 from both sides, and that leaves us with negative 4t is less than or equal to negative 16. I can divide both sides by negative 4, and when I do that, again, I need to flip my inequality. So t is going to be greater than or equal to positive 4. So I'm going to go ahead and label some values on my number line again. And then I'm going to have an open circle at positive 2. And I'm going to shade everything less than that going to the left. And I will have a filled in circle at positive 4. And I will shade everything that is going to the right. So I have one more example for us, and it's another OR compound inequality. So let's subtract 12 from both sides. We're left with 4k is less than negative 10. We're going to divide both sides by 4, and you could divide it, or you could just reduce this fraction to negative 5 halves or negative 2.5. Let's go ahead and subtract 4 from both sides of our second inequality. We're left with negative 2k is greater than 0. When I divide both sides by negative 2, that's going to flip my inequality, and that is just simplified to 0. But look, both of these have the less than symbol for their inequality, which all of our other scenarios for an OR statement, they pointed in the opposite direction. So if I was going to graph k is less than negative 5 halves on my number line, I'd have an open circle at negative 2.5, and it would go to the left. And then if I was going to plot k is less than 0, I would have an open circle at 0, and it would go again to the left. And so you can see how it's basically overlapping my first inequality. So when this happens, we're going to imagine that our first inequality really wasn't there because it's included in the k is less than 0 for what has been shaded. So for this problem, I would say that k is less than 0 is going to be my final solution. And just kind of a tip for yourself is that whenever you see this happening where they're overlapping, is just pick whichever inequality is going to cover more solutions on your number line. And that's it. So to wrap up, I have 2 problems for you to try on your own. I want you to write a compound inequality to describe the graph that is given. And if you have any questions, come and see me when you come into class.